The chandelier above the dining table cost more than most people's houses. I know because my grandmother loved to mention it. $340,000, custom Venetian glass, shipped in pieces across the Atlantic. I was staring at it when my mother said the words that would change everything. Catherine, you're no longer a Wellington. Pack your things. You have until morning. The worst part wasn't being disowned at my own birthday dinner, surrounded by 75 guests in designer gowns. It was that I'd seen this coming for 3 years and done nothing to stop it. But that was about to change. Let me back up to where this really started, the summer I turned 19. The Wellington estate sprawled across 42 acres in Connecticut's Gold Coast. Old money, the kind where you don't talk about wealth because everyone already knows. My father ran Wellington Capital Management. My mother chaired 5 nonprofit boards. My older sister Adriana was finishing Harvard Law. And then there was me. Your portfolio analysis is pedestrian, Catherine. My father didn't look up from his Financial Times at breakfast that morning, 3 years before that dinner. A Wellington doesn't settle for pedestrian. I was majoring in social work at a state school. Not Yale, not Princeton. A state school with, gasp, a 60% acceptance rate. The disappointment in his voice had become so familiar I barely registered it anymore. Like the scent of his cologne or the sound of my mother's heels on marble. Just part of the background noise of being the family failure. I got an A on that analysis, I said quietly. An A at that institution means very little. He turned the page. Adriana was publishing in the Harvard Law Review at your age. My mother set down her coffee cup, bone china, delicate clink. Darling, your father's simply saying you have potential you're not utilizing. The Wellington name carries certain expectations. Expectations. I'd been drowning in them since I could walk. The breaking point came 6 months later, during Christmas break. I'd brought home my boyfriend, James. Sweet, funny James, who worked as a middle school teacher and drove a 10-year-old Honda. James, who made me laugh until my stomach hurt and never once asked about my trust fund. Dinner lasted exactly 43 minutes. So, James, my father swirled his wine. A 1982 Chateau Pétrus he'd mentioned cost $4,200 per bottle. What do your parents do? James smiled, oblivious to the trap. My mom's a nurse, Dad's retired. He was a plumber for 30 years. The silence that followed felt like ice cracking. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Adriana's eyes went wide. My grandmother, 78 years old and sharp as broken glass, actually gasped. A plumber, my father repeated, not a question. A verdict. Yes, sir. He worked his way up from apprentice to owning his own business, employed 12 people by the time he... Catherine. My mother's voice cut through like a blade. Might we speak with you, privately? The library smelled like leather and old cigars. Family portraits lined the walls. Generations of Wellingtons staring down in judgment. This is unacceptable, my mother said the moment the door closed. A teacher? From that background? That background? He's a good person who is entirely unsuitable. My father's tone allowed no argument. You will end this relationship immediately. The Wellington name cannot be associated with... With what? Someone who actually works for a living instead of moving money around? The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My mother had never hit me before. She looked as shocked as I felt. Then her face hardened. You do not speak to your father that way. You will apologize and you will end this dalliance. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat. Something in my chest, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. No. That single word changed everything. My father's face went red. What did you say? I said no. My voice shook but held steady. James is kind and good and he makes me happy. I'm not ending it because he's not rich enough for you. Then you're choosing him over your family. My mother's voice went cold. That particular Wellington coldness that felt like winter settling into your bones. You're choosing yourself over your responsibilities, my father added. Over your name. Over everything we've built. You built it, not me. I never asked for any of this. Adriana appeared in the doorway. Kate, don't be stupid. Just apologize and what? Spend my whole life pretending to be someone I'm not? Marrying someone I don't love because his portfolio impresses Dad? Sitting on charity boards and throwing galas while people actually suffer? How dare you? My grandmother's voice came from behind Adriana. She moved into the room slowly, leaning on her cane, the one with the sterling silver handle shaped like a swan. We have given you everything. The finest schools, the best opportunities, a name that opens any door in this country, and you throw it away for some nobody with a working class pedigree? He's not a nobody. He is beneath you. She punctuated each word with her cane. As this behavior is beneath a Wellington, your father gave you a clear choice, Catherine. The family or this boy. Choose. I chose James. They cut me off that night. My credit cards stopped working by morning. My monthly allowance, $8,000 I'd barely touched because it felt wrong, vanished. The apartment they'd been paying for near campus? Lease canceled, but the cruelty didn't stop there. My father made calls. Suddenly, my application for a research grant I'd been counting on was no longer being considered. The internship at the nonprofit where I'd been volunteering? Position filled. The Wellington Foundation scholarships that had been quietly funding half my classmates? Restructured. A coincidence? Surely. James moved me into his tiny studio apartment. We ate ramen and pasta for 2 months straight. I got a job waitressing at a diner where the grease smell clung to my hair even after 3 showers. And you know what? I was happier than I'd been in years, for about 6 months. Then my mother showed up at the diner, 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, between lunch and dinner rush. She'd never set foot in a place like this. I could tell by the way she looked at the vinyl booths and laminated menus like they might contaminate her. Catherine. She slid into a booth, didn't wait for an invitation. Sit. I glanced at my manager, got a nod, took my break. You've made your point, she said. This little rebellion, playing poor. It's been entertaining, I'm sure, but it's time to come home. I am home. You're living in a 400-square-foot apartment in a neighborhood where your car gets broken into. Your father and I have discussed it. We're willing to forgive this episode. End things with the boy. Return to school. A proper school this time. We'll arrange Yale or Columbia, and everything goes back to normal. What about James? What about him? Catherine, be realistic. This infatuation has run its course. You've proven whatever you felt you needed to prove. But you're a Wellington. This, she gestured at the diner, at my grease-stained apron, at my life. This isn't who you are. Maybe it is. Her lips thinned. Your father is prepared to restore everything. Your allowance, your apartment, your future. All you have to do is come home and stop this nonsense. And if I don't, the temperature in her eyes dropped 10 degrees. Then you'll learn what it truly means to be cut off from this family. No more half measures. Your father has been restrained until now. But if you insist on this path, he will ensure every door in this city, in this country, closes in your face. Every opportunity, every connection, every chance at the life you could have had, gone. She stood, smoothed her dress. Chanel, probably $8,000, more than I'd make in 3 months of slinging hash browns. You have 1 week to decide. After that, you're not just cut off, Catherine. You're erased. She left a $100 bill on the table for a coffee she never ordered. I stared at it, more than I'd make in an entire shift, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not fear, not even anger. Determination. That night, I sat with James in our tiny apartment, knees pulled to my chest. They want you to be miserable, he said, angry in a way I'd never seen him. Quiet, careful James who never raised his voice. They're punishing you for choosing your own life. They're punishing me for embarrassing them. So what do? I thought about that for a long time, about the way my father had made calls to destroy my opportunities, about my mother's cold ultimatum, about 3 generations of Wellingtons staring down from portraits, judging, measuring, finding everyone insufficient, I become exactly what they're afraid of, I finally said. James looked at me. What do you mean? They've spent my whole life telling me the Wellington name is everything, that it opens doors, commands respect, builds empires. They've used it like a weapon to control me. I turned to him. What if I used it like a weapon back? Over the next 6 months, I built a plan. I finished my degree, state school and all, with a 4.0 GPA. I worked 3 jobs: the diner, a weekend position at a domestic violence shelter, and overnight shifts at a crisis hotline. I slept 4 hours a night and lived on coffee and spite. But more importantly, I watched. I learned. I documented. See, the Wellington family fortune came with a complicated history. My great-grandfather had built Wellington Capital Management through a combination of brilliant investing and ruthless business practices. My grandfather had expanded it. My father had modernized it. But they'd all cut corners, made deals in gray areas, stepped on people who couldn't fight back. And I'd grown up hearing the stories at dinner parties, watching the handshake agreements, seeing the quiet payoffs that kept scandals buried. I still had access to one thing they'd forgotten about: the family cloud storage. My grandmother had insisted everyone use it for family memories: photos, documents, videos. My father had been lazy about security because it's just family. I started downloading. Everything. 18 months after they cut me off, I walked back into Wellington Estate. My 22nd birthday. The dinner where this story started. They'd invited me back. My mother's idea, Adriana told me later. A final chance to see reason before they completely erased me from the family history. Literally. They were planning to remove me from the official genealogy records. 75 guests. Diamond necklaces and designer suits. Politicians, CEOs. Old money families whose names appeared in history textbooks. I wore a dress from Target, $32.99, and I'd never felt more powerful. Catherine! My father greeted me at the door like a stranger. How unexpected that you came. Wouldn't miss it. Dinner was excruciating. I was seated at the far end of the table, away from the important guests. My grandmother made pointed comments about my dress. Adriana introduced her fiancé, a hedge fund manager, naturally, and my mother made sure everyone knew about the Yale pedigree. Then came the cake, the speeches, the toasts to family, to legacy, to the Wellington name. My father stood, glass raised. To Catherine, may she finally understand what truly matters. That's when I stood too. Actually, I'd like to say something. The room went quiet. My mother's eyes flashed warning. My father's jaw tightened. I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with my family tonight. The Wellingtons have always been about family, about protecting the name, about maintaining our reputation. I pulled out my phone. Which is why I thought you should all know what that reputation is really built on. Catherine, sit down. My father's voice was steel. Dad has Wellington Capital Management handling investments for half the people in this room, right? Retirement funds, trusts, charitable foundations. I tapped my phone. The TV on the wall, installed for family movie nights, flickered to life. Email chains appeared, my father's email. These are from 3 years ago. Dad knew that Meridian Tech was going to fail, had insider information about their fraud. But instead of warning his clients who were invested, he shorted the stock himself, made $4.2 million while his clients lost everything. Gasps around the table. My father's face went purple. You have no right to. There's more. Another swipe. New documents. The Wellington Foundation Scholarship Fund, the one that's supposed to help underprivileged students. Turns out only 23% actually goes to scholarships. The rest funds the administrative costs of the board, which is just our family taking salaries for rubber stamping applications. My mother stood. Turn that off immediately. Or what? You'll disown me again? I smiled. Here's my favorite part. Grandmother's favorite charity, the one she chairs, the Children's Hospital Fund. I have emails showing that when developers wanted to build luxury condos on the land the hospital needed to expand, she took a $2 million consulting fee to use her influence to approve the zoning change. Sick kids couldn't get treatment, but grandmother got a new beach house in the Hamptons. The room erupted. guests shouting questions. My father lunging toward me. Security grabbed him. My grandmother clutching her chest, dramatic as always. My mother's face had gone gray. I've sent copies to the SEC, the IRS, and 3 major newspapers, I continued over the chaos. Everything is documented, verified, time-stamped. All those corners you cut, all those people you stepped on, all those secrets you thought the Wellington name would keep buried forever. Adriana stared at me in horror. Kate, what did you do? I became exactly what they raised me to be. I met my father's eyes. Ruthless, strategic, willing to do whatever it takes to win. You've destroyed this family, my mother whispered. No, I've exposed it. There's a difference. I walked toward the door. The crowd parted like I was radioactive. Oh, and Dad? That week you gave me to decide? I've spent the last 18 months deciding. I choose honesty over legacy, integrity over money, and people I love over people who only love the Wellington name. At the door, I turned back one last time. By the way, you're right. The Wellington name does open doors. I'm opening all of them. The investigations took 8 months. My father was charged with securities fraud and insider trading. He took a plea deal, 3 years minimum security, $8.7 million in fines and restitution to the clients he'd defrauded. Wellington Capital Management collapsed. 40 employees lost their jobs. That part hurt, but they all received severance, and most found new positions. The company had been rotten at the core. My grandmother was never charged, too old, too sympathetic, and she hired lawyers who cost more than small countries. But she had to step down from every board. The social exile was almost worse for her than prison would have been. My mother kept her head down, stayed quiet, survived on what remained of her own family money. We don't talk. Adriana called me once, 3 months after everything exploded. I hope you're happy, she said. You destroyed everything. I destroyed a lie, I corrected. There's a difference. She hung up. We haven't spoken since. The Wellington name, the one I'd carried like a weight my entire life, became synonymous with fraud and corruption. Forbes ran a feature, The Fall of a Dynasty. The New York Times did a deep dive into generational wealth and ethical bankruptcy. I changed my name legally. Catherine Wellington became Kate Wells. Here's what they don't tell you about burning everything down. It's terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I lost my family, my inheritance, the safety net I'd grown up taking for granted. Every door the Wellington name had opened slammed shut. But I kept James. I kept my integrity. I kept the ability to look at myself in the mirror. I'm 24 now. I work for a nonprofit that helps domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives. I make $43,000 a year. James and I got married in a courthouse with 6 friends watching. We're saving for a down payment on a tiny house with a yard where we want to plant tomatoes. My apartment doesn't have a $340,000 chandelier, but it has windows that let in morning light and photographs of people who love me for who I am, not what I'm worth. Sometimes I think about that last dinner, the moment I stood up and detonated everything. People ask if I regret it. The honest answer? Some days, yes. I think about the life I could have had, the ease of it, the financial security, never worrying about rent or health care or whether the car will make it another year. But then I think about who I would have had to become to keep all that, the compromises, the looking away, the slow erosion of everything I believed in until I became just another Wellington, beautiful and cold and hollow. And I know I made the right choice. My rich family kicked me out for loving someone they thought was beneath me. So I became their worst nightmare, not by destroying them from outside, but by telling the truth they'd spent generations hiding. The Wellington Empire is gone. But Catherine Wellington, the girl who was supposed to continue the legacy, she's gone too. In her place is just Kate, working hard, loving freely, sleeping soundly. And that chandelier? I heard they had to sell it at auction to cover legal fees. It went for $180,000, half what they paid for it. Turns out even Venetian glass loses value when the lie behind it shatters. Kate, in her modest apartment, morning light streaming through windows, laughing at something off camera. The simplicity of the space makes it clear she chose truth over luxury, and she's never looked back.